on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
AM 560 Traffic Center time and Jim.
In Arlington Heights, crews are responding to a structure fire at Oakton east of Walnut. The outbound ride is still closed in the local lanes from 47th to the Skyway after a major rollover involving a landfill truck, a spilled load, and fuel leaks. The traffic diverts into the express at 47th. Prepare to slow down there. Ramps are closed in that area. Inbound, your delays are from 95th Street to the Skyway and Cermak to the Burn Circle. It's 25 minutes, 95th to downtown. Eden's 20 minutes, Lake Cook to the Junction. Kennedy, 23 minutes, O'Hare to downtown. Yike, 34 minutes from 390. Stevenson, 39 minutes from 355. Bishop Ford, just a little congested approaching the merge. The tollways are light. I'm Jim Alamonte. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Mild day ahead. Rain and drizzle, high 47. Winter storm watches and warnings go into effect overnight with some heavy winds and a low of 34, with a strong icy mix picking up early in the morning with the snow in the afternoon on Saturday, high 34. It's 46 degrees at O'Hare. Next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Get Down to Business with Shalom Klein, the show for business and jobs powered by Tandem HR. Heard Sunday evenings at 6.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Just one more story on the topic we were discussing before Mike Scott's newscast.
Yeah, you got to repeat this. This is good.
So this is in the context of Tiffany Fitzhenry's reporting on this lawsuit filed last fall by a mom on behalf of her son who was allegedly sexually abused ritually for 4 years in Hollywood by all sorts of executives. And it speaks to this dark system in Hollywood, allegedly. But boy, there's a lot of evidence to suggest we should remove the descriptor allegedly. Here's another one. This was Lawrence Fishburne, you know, the great actor from Matrix and so many other movies. People forget Lawrence Fishburne was a child actor, too.
Mm-hmm.
He was cast in Apocalypse Now when he was 14 years old. And several years ago, he was on with Terry Gross and Fresh Air, you know, on NPR.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Gross, your father insisted on being on the set. She's talking about him being cast at 14 on Apocalypse Now. Your father insisted on being on the set. Fishburne, yes. And I read that he literally carried a baseball bat around. Fishburne, yes, he did. Terry Gross, did he beat you with it? Fishburne, what? No. The baseball bat was to beat anyone who got near me. There were a lot of drugs and goings-on that set my dad didn't like. This is Lawrence Fishburne
Father
at
of the
14
year.
years
old. Oh, yeah.
This is 45 years ago.
So it's been going on since probably the beginning of time. Since the first film was made, I'm sure.
And it's also
but
something
that says a lot about the culture, and then it's how predatory it is. And you got to protect yourself with a baseball bat.
it's also something about, you know, we decry for some legitimate reasons the helicopter parents. But if you're
Yeah.
but if you're going to be a stage parent, then you better be on set with your kid. If you've got somebody
Every photo shoot, every read through, you have got to be there with your child.
Absolutely.
And I will never rip on anybody again for being a helicopter parent in that setting.
Yeah, I mean, so I just thought the Fishburne story was remarkable, so I wanted to share it. All right, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about aviation. You know, one of the curious things about this downed commercial airliner in Tehran. On the night that Iran launched missile strikes against U.S. positions in Iraq. Hours before that plane was shot down by the Iranians, we believe,
Yes.
highly likely, the U.S. had issued a no-fly order over Iraq and Iran.
Right.
So when the U.S. is issuing no-fly orders, wouldn't that be a signal for
To other airlines and other countries that, hey,
Absolutely.
it might not be safe to go on. They boarded at 5:30 a.m., and it was dark there, obviously. And it was just an hour after they had stopped launching the missiles. So personally, as a passenger, I would not have gotten on that plane, but they did. They felt safe. The pilot obviously felt safe enough to take off.
Well, let's start there with Robert Mark, our friend, who's a senior editor at Flying Magazine and publisher of Jet Whine. That's WHINE, jetwine.com. Robert, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Sorry it's under these circumstances as usual.
Yeah, I know. But what about that matter of U.S. Issues a no-fly or makes Iran and Iraq issues a no-fly alert, and yet that plane takes off? Should commercial airliners have been flying that night, regardless of the mistake or the purposeful nature of taking down that plane by the Iranians?
Well, the no-fly was really only for U.S. registered aircraft.
I understand, but I mean, isn't that a signal? I mean, wouldn't that concern you if you're whoever you are?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's, I've been asked that before, and I said I find it so hard to believe that the crew was not aware of what was going on outside the airplane before they took off, and that's the captain's responsibility to say, no, we're not going. However, we don't know the circumstances under which the Ukrainian airlines operate. I mean, we have tons and tons of young pilots flying all over the world these days, and it's easy for an old guy like me to say, no, I'm not going, and I'm not taking all these people with me. But somebody that might be, early 30s, and it's their first flying job for a big airline, they might say, well, the boss said we got to go. I guess we got to go. And because I cannot imagine any other circumstances that would put that airplane into the air. You'd have to be completely daft to not realize that they were shooting missiles out there just not long before, and to say, this is not safe.
Now, there's 2 black boxes, and Iranian officials are finally going to let employees from Boeing go to the site and examine those black boxes. What are they going to learn from those? What do they hope to learn, I should say?
Well, I had not heard about Boeing. I knew the NTSB was going to be allowed to take a look. But what they're going to see is the recorders record every movement, essentially, of the airplane. And what we did know a couple of days ago was that something catastrophic took the airplane out of the sky. I mean, it didn't initially. They said it was a mechanical failure, maybe an engine failure, and that doesn't drop the airplane out of the sky. I mean, if an engine quits, the airplane still flies on the other one. Even if both engines quit, the airplane is still gliding. It may be coming down, but it's still under control. But this airplane just completely disappeared in a flash. And the flight recorders are going to show that instantaneous, we expect that they're going to show this instantaneous termination of all the information, which would kind of line up with something catastrophic. Now, of course, what we don't know, we still don't know for certain. We have lots of reports in the Western media that it was an Iranian surface to air, a Russian-made surface to air missile the Iranians used, but we still don't have the proof of that. That's the speculation.
The pilot, though, so talking about, I understand the pilot was rather experienced. The captain was rather experienced. It wasn't a young pilot feeling pressure for his big, to his first big job with a major carrier. Is that true?
Well, yeah, and I should have added that part at the end. I was going to say if it had been a new pilot, you could have understood maybe why they did that. But an experienced captain, that's just beyond me.
So
I just
strange.
cannot understand that.
Well, so now let's go back to what happened. So there's some video footage you've probably seen where the plane is clearly on fire, and then it's descending, and it disappears behind a mountain range and explodes. But there's a report by witnesses that the pilot was able to steer the plane toward a soccer field and away from a residential area. I mean, that may be sort of a Rashomon effect issue. Eyewitnesses making determinations about what the pilot was doing. But if that is true, does that tell you anything about the prospect? Does that increase the prospect? It could have been some sort of mechanical failure where he still had some control over the plane.
Well, I did see that report that there was a turn. We have to realize this all happened almost literally in a
Fast.
flash.
Yeah.
But of course, the missile, if it was indeed a missile, is not designed to strike the aircraft itself. It's designed to explode within close proximity to the airplane, and basically send shrapnel through the airplane that destroys the thing. But
Right.
so they may have had a second or two, but again, the whole flight it didn't even last 2 minutes, I believe. But one thing on the pilot side, though, we don't know for certain that the pilot did not have those concerns and get some sort of assurance from the airline or the government that no, don't worry, it's done, it's safe, it's all over, you can fly now. That may indeed have been the case.
And it's weird because I learned yesterday, I was watching CNN, but they said that the U.S. saw Iranian radar signals lock onto that airplane before it was shut down.
Well, that is the report. I mean, and again, it's hard to understand how any military batteries, especially right near Tehran's main airport, would lock onto a civil airliner and make that kind of a mistake. I mean, they knew the hostilities were going on, so there's probably going to be some kind of huge miscommunication issue here too. But then we've seen that somewhat before when that Malaysian airplane was shot down over the eastern Ukraine some years back.
Yeah, but I mean, there wasn't like Iran was taking any retaliatory or responsive fire, right? I mean, so what would they?
No, that's true.
What would they think that was? How could they see that as a threat in that context? And as you say, taking off from Tehran Airport and being in the air for 2 minutes. This whole it was an accident thing. I don't know. That is such a wild error in judgment. It's hard to believe it was an accident.
Well, I know. I guess I'm being a bit altruistic.
Yeah.
As a pilot and responsible for lives, but I just can't believe that anybody would have done that on purpose. And of course, there is history that the U.S. Navy shot down an Iranian airliner many years ago by mistake, and it does happen, but intentionally, I cannot imagine what anybody would hope to gain from this if they did it on purpose. I just can't believe that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you've got all kinds of Democrats and press flags blaming President Trump for the downing of that plane. So maybe the Iranians have a better handle on our political culture than we do. I wanted to get your take on something else. I don't want to have to drag you into the depths of politics here.
That's probably a good move.
Yes, I know. I know.
It's 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Well,
we didn't tell you this part of the
sleep
interview,
late?
did we?
Right. So Boeing. I mean, this was a Boeing airliner that was shot down, but
Not the Supermax.
yeah. Well, and
It was a
obviously,
737-800.
and obviously, it's this is a completely separate and distinct issue. But there is an issue with Boeing and its internal documents that were released yesterday, about 150 pages worth, that show a lot of Boeing employees.
You're saying that a clown put together the 737 MAX?
He talked to, there's emails. Yeah, this airplane is designed by clowns who are in turn supervised by monkeys. Another mentioning unnamed quote-unquote morons who decided to put certain kinds of instrument displays on the MAX. One employee adding that India's top aviation regulator is apparently even stupider, quote-unquote. So, I mean, it raises all sorts of concerns, both internally with respect to Boeing and with respect to aviation regulators the world over.
Well, I mean, Boeing has certainly in the last year become the official U.S. punching bag. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that they haven't done some pretty stupid things, but, in the rush to get that airplane out there quickly to compete with the Airbus, I mean, it's cost Boeing its reputation, a reputation that took them 100 years to create. And there's no doubt that people tried to tell people at Boeing if there were problems, and they just simply did not listen because they were being driven by money, not by engineering and safety. And as
where
you
was
said, the FAA had a hand in this
right?
as well.
That's the thing. I mean, but the FAA seems to be in bed with Boeing.
Well, I don't know if I'd say they're in bed with them. It's pretty typical that FAA has never had enough inspectors to be able to have somebody or a number of people on the lines, on the production lines with an aircraft manufacturer. And they have people that go through very specific training within each aircraft company that FAA essentially gives them a license and says, okay, you're acting as one of us right now, and it's your job to be the gatekeeper and make sure that things are getting done correctly. And the FAA said, Boeing, you're really good at what you're doing, and you just kind of keep an eye on things and let us know if you have any problems.
Would you ever fly on a 737 MAX? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Would you ever fly in a 737 MAX?
Well, right now, I'm probably not the best person to ask because I probably know too much about it. But I still worry that as long as this has taken, and of course there was the issue of some of the wiring on board the airplane that may have to be looked at. We still don't know that the problem that brought the Ethiopian and the Lion Air crash, our airplanes down, is the only problem on board. We're just assuming it is because that's what Boeing is telling us. And I don't think anybody trusts Boeing at this point.
Right, and of course the countervailing evidence is that the MAX 8s that were part of commercial air carriers in this country, there hasn't been any problems, certainly no crashes.
No, and part of that goes to something that I think I heard mentioned earlier about the equipment on the airplanes. The U.S.-built aircraft all had dual sensors to warn the pilots that there was a disagreement between this angle of attack indicator that made the MCAS go off. Well, a lot of the other airplanes, like the Ethiopian and Lion Air ones, only had one. And in my life, I've never heard anybody build an airplane with one flight instrument in it. There's always been a backup. And redundancy for a reason, because things can go wrong and you need a backup. They added it as an option. And that's where I think they really lost me, because Boeing was a strong company for years. They still build good airplanes. But whoever came up with that idea was, what did you say, a monkey or a clown? I don't remember.
One of the two.
Yeah.
Probably both.
Robert Mark, senior editor at Flying Magazine, publisher of Jet Whine. That's WHINE, jetwine.com. Robert, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's